Welcome to the Audible Genius Podcast, where we take a behind-the-scenes look at being a musician. I'm Joe Hanley, and today I'm talking to Jeremy Leaird Koch, who is active in many parts of the online music world, but is best known as the man behind the Red Means Recording YouTube channel and a successful online music production teacher. We'll be talking about how his YouTube channel and teaching business feed into each other, the challenge of keeping up with the fast pace of today's ever-changing music landscape, and advice for how new musicians can find their niche in the world of music. Let's get started. Okay, so you do a lot of different things. You got a successful YouTube channel, Patreon, you do online one-on-one lessons, you release original music, offer mixing and mastering services, and on top of all that audio stuff, you also do professional video production at a very high level, I might add. I've watched some of your videos, and it's really, really good stuff. It's not just like a musician doing video stuff on the side. How do you balance all those different things?
First of all, I mean, I really, really like doing all of those things. So it's pretty, I think that's a big part of it. It's just sort of like really enjoying what you do. Like I love editing video. Like I know some people don't. So I'm fortunate that all of the sort of technical things that I have to get involved in to make what I do work are things that I generally enjoy. As for balance, I mean, it's really sort of about scheduling both, well, okay, let's be clear. So like all of the things that you just mentioned, like the things like, you know, music production and video production. I mean, I spent a decade learning that stuff before I got to here. So like, you know, that took time as well. Now it's just sort of like executing on ideas and making sure I have chunks of time to do those things. So, you know, teaching takes up most of my time. And then when I set up my teaching schedule, I set it up in such a way that I knew I would have certain chunks of time to execute on the other things that I do, like filming a video or learning a new piece of gear to do a video on, or you know, writing some music or something like that. So it's really about compartmentalizing for me, it's about compartmentalizing my time and focus into these buckets so that I know that like when I move to this bucket, this is what I'm doing. And I guess buckets are really bad word for just scheduled chunk of time, really. I'm really big on compartmentalization when it comes to trying to be efficient, because if I don't, then like the like stress or like weirdness from or, you know, just something else will bleed into the time that I'm supposed to be executing on another thing, and then I won't be able to execute on that. And that actually extends outside of professional stuff and into like, you know, interpersonal stuff as well. It's like if I don't compartmentalize the professional stuff, it leaks into more personal and back and forth. And I just don't really want to do that.
And that's so essentially your time blocking. Like you really are strict about like, I'm going to do this much from this time to that time this day, and then et cetera, et cetera. So you really structure it out in advance.
So I know how long certain tasks take me to accomplish, and I sort of go into them knowing that if I have this much time during this period of the day, I will be able to accomplish that task. And so it's not like I have a strict schedule that's written down. It's more of a sort of understanding how long it takes me to do certain things, and just sort of slotting things in so that I'm most efficiently getting them done in those periods of time.
Okay. And so your teaching schedule is kind of the core where you have your lessons kind of scheduled out, and then you're able to sort of in a flexible way fill in between with everything else.
That's the idea.
Okay.
When I first started teaching, I didn't really think it through. And like I put my lessons back to back. I was like, it's on the internet, I'll just switch over. I immediately realized that was like the dumbest thing I'd ever done. It's like, okay, yeah, you need 30 minutes between each one just to like, you know, make sure that if it goes over, you still okay, and you're not taking time from somebody else, or like, you know, God forbid you have to use the restroom or get some water or something. So yeah, I learned quick that like, yeah, you actually need to buffer time in a lot of things like that.
Okay. And does your YouTube channel, which, you know, has over 400,000 subscribers, over 42 million views, does that generate students for you?
it led to me being able to teach. That was the YouTube channel was the reason that I was able to switch to teaching as my main thing. Um, and now I really see the YouTube channel as a sort of calling card for all the other things I do, with lessons being the number one, because I have to prioritize what brings in the most income. And Patreon and lessons are the thing that I make my real money from. So I I try to make YouTube videos that educate and entertain. It's impossible for me to give away all the information that I have in my head, because a lot of the teaching is one-on-one. All of it's one-on-one. So it's always about answering specific questions with people about what they have going on, feedback with their tracks, shit like that, stuff like that. Excuse me. And that's impossible to do via a YouTube video. I can knowledge dump on people, and if they prefer to learn linearly through a video, then that's a resource for them. But I there's a feedback loop between the YouTube videos and the lessons, in that if I see something in lessons coming up multiple times from people, or if I have a really good session with a student on something that I'm like, wow, that was really cool. Like, I learned a way to look at this that I thought was pretty cool, and they learned something. I'll turn that into a video, and vice versa. Like, if I see something coming up a lot in lessons, I'll turn that into a video, and try to create like these sort of, heat maps of what students are looking for, and what also dovetails with the YouTube channel in terms of what makes good content, even though that's kind of lower priority than just making stuff that gets the point that I'm trying to make across.
Oh, it's interesting. But what are some of the common things that students want to learn?
Let's see. Synthesis. I mean, like, yeah, like I've
Yeah.
directed people to Centorial quite a bit.
Now, for our listeners, Jeremy just mentioned Centorial, which is a course he recommends to some of his students when they want to learn how to design sound with a synthesizer. Now, of course, if you're looking for a one-on-one teacher to guide you through synthesis, Jeremy is your man. However, if you're looking for a course to do on your own, Centorial is a super effective one that we here at Audible Genius created. It comes with a built-in synth that you'll make hundreds of sounds on as you go through the course. It starts at the very beginning, teaching you one control at a time, until before you know it, you're making great sounding patches by ear. Check it out at centorial.com.
Um, Songwriting is the number one thing that people want to learn, and I haven't done a video on it yet. But basically, breaking out of an 8 bar loop. We have a lot of people, especially that I talk to, are invested in hardware for whatever reason, and hardware does present itself in such a way that it is very easy to write a 4 bar or 8 bar loop, but then a lot of people don't really know what to do with it next. And so I try to connect people to the concept that what they are doing is part of a greater language of music, meaning that, like, if you write anything, it has something to do with a piece that already exists, because we aren't writing things that are like, we're not synthesizing things that are completely out of nowhere. We're pulling from things that we understand. So I try to connect people to the concept of, like, listening to what they have done, and ask themselves where it fits in with other music, and how that music moves from different parts of itself to other parts of itself, and just sort of connect them to the concept of, you're not alone in writing here. Like, you're not an island. Like, you're part of a much bigger conversation whenever you try to write a piece of music.
Oh, that's interesting. So, like, if they start with some kind of 8 bar loop, you try to get them to sort of try to figure out where that came from, like inside them,
Mm-hmm.
where it came from, what idea did,
Yeah,
or what inspiration gave birth to it.
yeah.
Ah,
If the I feel like the reason that well, I feel like the way that I'm able to write music is by, we start with a seed. We Something starts us down the path of wanting to write a new piece of music, whether or not that's a sample we found, or maybe an emotion, or, there's a lot of ways that we can be inspired to start a piece of music. And if we have structure going into it, then we can really, like, direct our sort of flow and our energy to make what we start writing, like, be more what we want it to be. Like if the more focus we have going in, the quicker we'll get to where we want to go. But a lot of people starting out don't have that focus. They don't know how to just channel like the production style of this for the emotion of this with like these instruments. You know, they're more of like, I'm going to pick something that kind of feels right, and then I'm going to pick something that kind of feels right, and then I'm going to end up with something that I don't know what to do with. So being able to like listen to what you've done and connect it to music that you've heard so that you can pick out like ways that that music moves in and out of like the A sections and B sections and how it uses contrast and stuff like that will allow you to, you know, nurture your piece in a direction that maybe it should go.
Yeah, that kind of thing does seem really makes me show you how important teachers are, because like you said, you really can't get that help from a video because it's so personal, right? To have someone like one on
Yeah.
one, it's almost like therapy. Does it often kind of feel like therapy
Yes.
sometimes?
And it's not that just that like it feels like therapy. Like there's a lot of psychology that and emotional sort of, you know, navigation that has to happen in these conversations, because you have to, one, connect people with the fact that music is feeling. Like, you know, there are pieces of music out there that aren't really interested in emotion or expression. They're, you know, serial music, stuff that is basically just math based or like conceptual. Process music is sometimes what I call it, where you're supposed to marvel at the process that led to it as opposed to the output of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think a lot of people who get into music, especially the people that I talk to, they do it because they love it. They do it because they love music, and like we have to like take that love and unlock people's ability to basically tear apart what they love and then put it back together so they can express themselves. And connecting to that part of you that like can be both analytical and emotional at the same time is pretty difficult, and takes some wrangling.
Yeah, I feel like that right there, what you just said, is maybe one of the biggest benefits a human can get from learning how to play an instrument or learn how to make music
Absolutely.
is to marry
Yeah.
those two sides of your brain, the analytical and the creative side.
Yeah, it's an incredible thing. I mean, it really is a craft, you know, like production, like in the same way that sculpting or painting is a craft. You know, we think of it as art, but it's very mechanical in a lot of ways. There's a lot of mechanics to it, and it's really fun to get good at it so that you can like use the tools very fluidly to express yourself and know like exactly what kind of brush or paint to reach for to get what you want out of a thing. And that flow state that you eventually get to when you actually really know what you're doing, or at least pretend to know what you're doing, is powerful. It's super, super powerful.
Hmm. Do a lot of your students want to stick to like weekly lessons, or are some of them more just like a la carte here and there kind of thing?
Um, I'd say at this point, it's mostly the former. I offer a few different like tiers. Like it's not weekly. Like some people do it once a month. Um, excuse me. Some people do it more often. It really depends on what they're trying to get out of it. Some people just want feedback on, like an EP they're working on. Like, so we'll have 1 or 2 or 3 sessions where we go over the tracks from their EP and like, I've even done like an album that took longer. And then sort of talk about like what I would do to improve certain sections, or at least make certain sections more what I like. And that's the thing, is like, if you're coming to me for feedback, you better like, you know, be down with the kind of music that I make, because that's what I'm going to turn your music into to an extent. So yeah, like there's a lot of different ways in which I can interact with you know, a student or a client. In some cases, you know, I wouldn't call a person bringing their album to me for fresh ears really a student. It's more so of a collaboration at that point.
Oh, okay. Almost like treating you like a consultant in a way.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So if someone comes to you with a style of music that just really isn't you're just not into it, or
Mhm.
maybe you don't feel confident that you could advise them, do you just kind of tell them that from the beginning, like, this isn't really my forte? Maybe you should
I
go
sure
somewhere else.
do.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I've run into, so let's see, stuff that like heavy noise music, like
Mm.
where it's like actually just noise music in general. I've had people come to me with noise stuff and ask for advice on mixing or arrangement, and I'm like, well, we're going to high pass some stuff, and then I'm going to say I really don't know what else to do with this, because it's like, how can I judge this aesthetically? It's like it there is music that is so iconoclastic, and that's fine, that it transcends the ability to aesthetically what do you call it, critique it. Like it's not, you can't critique it, like
Mm-hmm.
at least I can't. Maybe if I was more into experimental music, I could offer what do you call it, like points of reference. I think that's a big thing. It's like, okay, so what I'm hearing here kind of reminds me of this like point no point thing, and maybe a little bit of some other noise artist over here. Like, I think if you listen to these two tracks from them, maybe you would get some insight into how you could develop this theme or something like that. But that's the problem. There is no theme. Like it's atonal, it's noise. It's like, I appreciate that some people want to make that music, but I can't judge it aesthetically because it's outside of the realm of aesthetic judgment for my sort of understanding.
Right. Okay.
So I tell them, and in some cases there's a mutual understanding that that's fine. In some cases it becomes a little bit more complicated because I'm sort of committed to the process of, like, let's say like a weekly or bi-weekly experience with this person, and it's clear that their music in general is going to be difficult for me to help with. So in some very rare cases I'll have to be like, look, I can't really do this with you. Like, I don't have anything to offer in this case. You're doing your own thing, and that's really awesome. You don't really need me in this capacity. um, then there's been some people who have brought me some like virtuosic, like crazy, super intricately made stuff, and at that point I'm just holding on for dear life, trying to like make the best judgment that I can.
Mm-hmm.
um like if something sticks out to me like as being poorly mixed, or maybe it has too much of a transient quality, like there's sort of like technical things, like I'll be able to call those out. But if it's like the Bohemian Rhapsody of like hyperpop, I'm not going to be able to like judge it musically. I'm like, yeah, you fucking go, this is amazing. Like, you're doing your thing. I just respect that. And like, there's the funny thing, especially about like hyperpop and stuff like that, is like there's even production styles these days that like purposefully go against mixing conventions. And like what, like 100 gex like started doing like these kick drums that blow the whole mix out on purpose, like and you hear that now in like production styles. Like, so I had listened to a really amazing album from another YouTuber called Ro Ramden, who just this most like intricate, like amazingly constructed sort of post hyperpop album. And there's some tracks, the harder tracks, where they use that technique where the mix like bullet, like basically oversaturates on purpose. And I had to stop myself and be like, yeah, this is a thing that people do now. Like, it's not what I would do with this, but I totally understand that this is on purpose. And that's challenging too. It's like, you have to understand that, like, no, it's not a mixing error. They actually did this on purpose. And it speaks to a bigger conversation about where they were influenced from. And I think that's really, really interesting that that can happen.
Yeah, I sometimes wonder if that's sort of where, sort of a pumping compressor came from. Someone years ago just accidentally, put too much compression on, and then they realized, wait a minute, this actually sounds really cool, even though at that time it might have been thought, no, you don't do that. That's too
Yeah.
much compression.
That's a really good question. Like, I mean, like, who first used side chaining
Yeah.
in a creative way? Like, I'm assuming it was like disco, but I could be wrong. But yeah, like who, like the overly compressed sound, like the drums on like Tomorrow Never Knows from the Beatles and stuff like that. Like where did that first come from? Was it a mistake, or was it like, yeah, this sounds fucking cool, we're gonna do this?
Do the students often know when they first come to you, like what direction they want to go in? Like that they want to do that sort of challenging mix, or they just don't know where their music
They
needs to
don't
go?
know.
Okay.
Yeah, they don't. A lot of them just don't know. So I try. I usually, most of the time, I'll do like a 30-minute intro lesson just to like get a sense of, one, whether or not we're a good fit with people, and two, get a sense of where they are with music. Right? Like, have you played an instrument? How long ago? Like, do you know anything about music theory? Like, do you have any experience with production, et cetera, et cetera? And it's funny because people start to fall into like certain buckets. I'm not going to explain what the buckets are because I don't want to piss anybody off or make like be dismissive to anybody in their beginning stages. But one of the things I do see a lot from people is uh I don't know, like I want to do this thing, but I don't really understand like production language, or I don't really understand how to get like through from my idea to like creating the thing I want to. And so a lot of the times what we'll end up doing is I'll try to teach people how to like listen to music as a producer, which I really do want to do a video on, like, because I think it's a cool idea. It's just very kind of difficult to explain. Like, uh, do you make music?
Yes.
Okay. When you were learning to make music, like, do you make electronic music?
I mean, nowadays I run the company more than I do anything else. But yeah, one thing I've
Sure.
dabbled around in is electronic music.
Okay, so when you were trying to make electronic music, there were probably like like sounds and stuff that came out of the records that you were inspired by that you didn't understand, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe structural techniques or arrangement techniques that you didn't understand, but you liked the music. Okay, like you were like, this is dope, I want to do this. At some point you had to deconstruct parts of the music that you really liked in order to understand how it got to where it was. Like, the simplest thing I can think of is like understanding what different Roland drum machines sound like, so you can say that's an 808, that's a 909, that's a 606, and no longer have this mystery. Whenever you hear that drum machine in a mix, you can just be like, yeah, if I wanted that drum sound, I would just get this, or, use these samples. Same goes for like, a big one for me was like the 303 bass line. When I first heard it in like Prodigy tracks or like old rave tracks, I'm like, what the hell is that? Like, that is so freaking cool. And then I had to learn about what a 303 was, and spent, way too long in Rebirth back in the day.
Right.
So there's all these like little pieces to the music that we like that we can hyper focus on and really kind of quantify. Like, even just the nature of a kick drum can be like a complicated thing. And there's the meme like, oh, the snare sucks. Like, yeah, it's because snares are like really complicated. They're really, finding the right snare can be really hard. So I try to get people to start thinking about being able to listen to music more actively. And whatever you're having the most issue with at the moment, try to listen for that. So like, if people have issues with transitions, like, try to listen to how the music that you like uses transitions. Like, are there, sweeps up? Are they taking bass out? Are they doing fills? What's going on?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you have issues writing B parts or choruses, like, listen to music that has that structure, and then ask yourself what's different between, the A section and the B section. Like, what kind of contrast changes do they use and stuff like that. So basically, self-serve your learning experience by listening very, very attentively to what it is that you're trying to figure out at that time. Like, if you want to learn how to program drums, listen to just the drums in your mind, like when you're listening to a piece of music. Like, that's the thing. People are looking for YouTube videos and articles and forum posts for answers. People are using YouTube videos a lot to try to look for answers to this, but the real power that I think we have is not that. Like, it's actually just learning how to listen. So that's what I try to teach people who are who are just starting out and don't really know where to go, because they can self-serve that way, and hopefully just kind of like start to have aha moments in their own day-to-day.
Yeah, as you're saying this, it's taking me back to this like state of mind that I had as a beginner, where yeah, I'd be listening to something. Like in the early days, I was just learning piano. I'd be listening to some track, and I was like, "How are they playing that?" Because I was like, taking classical lessons. I had no idea how these like rock piano players were doing that. And then later, listening to
did you sit and like play? Did you sit and like play along with that shit? Like, did you?
Yeah,
did you?
I would just like, I'd play the first note and I'd pause the stereo so I could hear that note in my ear, then figure out what it was. Like, I had to go so meticulously because the teachers in my town, they were like classical. There was like one jazz person, but there was no one around to help me with specific styles. And later, same thing with synthesis. I'd hear these sounds. I'm like, how on earth? I know it's a synth, but how is that being
Yeah.
made. So to have, I wish I had had someone like you at that time, because I just had to like figure it out. How did you learn to get
Oh
to
god.
yourself into
I
this position?
it's been so long, that I don't really. Well, actually, that's not true. The exact way that we're talking, the
Okay.
only thing I could teach is what I know, right? Like, and when I started getting into electronic music, it was in that first like electronica wave that we had here in the U.S. So, Prodigy, Bjork, Crystal Method, Underworld, like it's when electronica was really like on the radio for the first time.
Mhm.
Pre EDM, like first rave sort of period of time. And so there was this stuff on the radio, which was cool. That was like straight up rave music. And I was like, whoa, that's dope. I'm a kid. I've got ADHD. I like it when the beats go burr. And so I was like, I want to do this. This is fun. And so eventually, I found out that there was software that you could use to do that stuff. I think it was like trackers or whatever. And I just started playing. Obviously, being interested in it and being and loving it is a really big part of your ability to grow, because you're just going to continue to throw yourself at it. Same way that like getting good at a video game is kind of. Um, but I didn't like have any internet, right? Like there was nothing like what we have now. We're really spoiled for information at
Yeah.
this point. And I encourage anybody who's trying to get into music production to really utilize like Google to ask questions and see what you can find about production techniques and sounds and stuff like that, because there's just an immense amount of information out there. So it was a lot of hunting and pecking. Basically, like at first I would hear something in like an album, like I remember like Bjork's use of strings in um the Post album alongside electronic music was like a revelation to me, because I was a classical kid as well, and like I loved the string sound. I loved the idea of being able to own it in a electronic context. So I was like, well, why don't I try using some string samples and seeing what that sounds like in the context of an electronic piece. Or hearing Moby's Play album, which was really simple. It was just basically a couple flipped samples and a drum beat. Like I'm like, oh, I could try something like that. And I was like, explored more and more, and like consumed more and more, mostly like finding synthesizer, like free and pirated synthesizers online, and free and pirated sample CDs online, or sample libraries online. I would get little pieces of understanding. Like all of a sudden I would come across a drum loop and be like, whoa, I've heard that before. Like, what's this? And, eventually I learned about like the jungle drum loops and like Amen break and all that kind of stuff. Same thing with synth sound. It's like you get the right tool, the right preset, and all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, like that's the sound that I heard in this one thing, kind of like, how is this made or whatever. So a lot of piecemeal. Like it took a long time. Like,
Yeah.
and it I don't know if it will take people as long these days, honestly. Like,
With the internet.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, we've got people making like platinum record beats in FL Studio, like when they're like 21 or whatever, and that's cool as hell. Like, it's great. The acceleration of music technology is astounding. Like, I kind of want to do a video about this, just like how lucky and spoiled we are right now for gear and software. Like, you see a lot of people complaining online about this stuff and like the features that certain things don't have, or why Roland doesn't do this or whatever. And it's like, yo, have you seen what we have access to? Like, it's crazy.
It's insane. Yeah, I was just having this.
Absolutely
I was having this
crazy.
conversation about synths and talking about back in the day. There wasn't even such thing as a synth preset. You had to pay thousands of
No.
dollars to get a hardware synth, and you couldn't even save your sounds. You just had to
Yeah.
dial them in every single time you needed them. And now it's just, yeah, it's a
Yeah.
gluttony of
Or on the other hand,
accessibility.
you'd have like the DX7, where you're like, yeah, all these sounds are great. Like, we're going to use this as a preset machine, but we're not going to program anything on it because it's a pain in the butt. Yeah. So now it's amazing. I really hope that people are encouraged to just dive into these tools and have fun, because like anything you want, you can usually get it for free, and not illegal at this point. Like, there's synths and samplers and DAWs that you could just like get started with and make an album if you wanted to. It's really, really cool.
That's cool. Now you're teaching tier, and so you use Patreon to teach your students.
I use so people can use Patreon to sign up for lessons.
Okay.
There's also an a la carte sort of thing.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, it's not just one.
Okay. I was looking through your tiers, and there's a couple of just interesting things I saw. One was the education tiers
Mhm.
with the one-on-one lessons. You also offer mastering, so like if,
Yeah,
one lesson a
yeah.
month and one track master. Do a lot of your students utilize both or just one?
Uh, n- Less students utilize the mastering than I would think, but also it's like finishing one track a month at the least is difficult for people.
Yeah.
Time is very very valuable and precious, so not everyone has time to do that. The people that are there are people who definitely send me tracks every month to master,
Okay.
and I'm down with that because like it keeps my skills fresh with mastering. And um it's one of those things that like encourages people to finish music.
Mm.
That's at least that's the idea that I have. It's like, yeah, like you finish a piece of music, I'll master it for you, and you'll have a nice crispy master that you can then say, hey, I did this. But yeah, it's not like every student I have is sending me their
Right.
mastering choices for the month.
Yeah, but that is a problem. Finishing things, particular music
Hmm.
production. I mean, in all sorts of skills and trades, people have a hard time
Hmm.
finishing things. But I feel like in music, it's so much, at least from my experience, it's so much easier to start a song 'cause it's new and it's fresh and it's fun. But that last 10%, man, it can be kind of a
So
slog for people.
yeah, and I have feelings about this, and ideas, and I'll tell them to you. One, finishing things is a skill that you have to practice. It is part of the muscle group that, well, it's a distinct muscle, I would say. And if we're going to make a body analogy, which no one asked for here, but I'm going to do it anyways. Um, like I think people are just like, oh, I just never get around to it. It's like, well, you have to practice it. And actually the more that you practice taking something from that kind of mid stage and finishing it, the easier it gets, because you start to like come up with your own ways of perceiving what finished means, and you can get there faster.
Mm.
I have like uh there's an other side, sort of problem to this, and that is that when people get to what they think might be the finished stage, they don't know when to say it's done and move away from it, right? Um, so they'll just continue to tweak. I used to do that a lot, like, and I had to actually stop myself. So now it's like, if I hear something that bothers me in a piece of music 3 times when I'm listening to it, and I'm not like actively touching the DAW, like if I can close my eyes and listen, so I'm not like engaging in like producer brain and I'm
Mhm.
just listening, then I'll fix it. I'll go and change it. Only after I've heard it 3 times, like after listening, like in a session. And then the opposite. If I've listened to a piece of music without touching the DAW or looking at the DAW, because that actually changes your perception of how the music is presented, and nothing jumps out at me, then I'm like, okay, cool. This is done. I can move on. But the other thing is, if you're working on like multiple projects at once, then working on them in like stages as opposed to like working on a track from start to finish. So like basically like you get your track to a certain point, like where you're like, yeah, this sounds pretty cool. This is a good idea. And you can drop it and then move on to another one and get it to that point too. When you're working on like a project like an EP, or maybe you're just working on a collection of songs that you like, you just want to make music like singles or whatever, but you end up with like all this stuff that's sort
Now,
of like not done. You can revisit them in like chunks at different stages and like just kind of flesh them out a little bit. Like today I'm going to work on a B section for each one of these tracks, or today I'm going to work on making the drum sound really good, or today is like transition effect day or whatever. Like you can basically pick tasks for the songs that you're working on and go and do those things to that thing, as opposed to having to like beat your head against this big linear timeline on your DAW that's like, hey, look at me, I'm
hmm,
not done yet. You can piecemeal stuff out and approach it in more modular sort of mindset, I guess. And it takes a lot of pressure off, I find, creatively, to approach it that way.
so instead of thinking about all the things that need to be done at once, you can just take a day and think about one thing or two things.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Do you find that with having multiple things going on, it's helpful that you get to sort of change your focus, like from teaching to mixing to making your own music? Do you find that's kind of helpful for your focus and for your mindset?
For the most part, yeah. I mean, I'll definitely get days where I feel like super scattered and I can't concentrate on anything. But I think that's more of a me problem personally than it is like a problem of what the situation I find myself in, you know. Um, but yeah, I really like being able to context switch within my control. I mean, like if you're working like at a job for somebody, or yeah, let's just put it that way. Like, and you're being asked to context switch there very fast and without your control, then it can really mess up your ability to focus. But if you know that a context switch is coming and you again compartmentalized like what each context is going to be, and you
Mhm.
can hit the ground running, then I think it can be really really invigorating, depending on how your brain works and how you like to work.
Okay. So like if you were met with a situation where you had to just work on one particular thing for a long period of time, like a week or two, do you think you would struggle with that after a while?
I like big projects.
Yeah.
Like I like big editing projects. I like throwing myself at something that feels a bit more substantial, because the nature of YouTube, um, and a lot of things right now is basically like you get it out and it's done and it's gone. And then you better have something for the next week, you know. So there's a lot of like treadmill-y kind of stuff. So it's really nice to be able to throw yourself at a project that has a bit more weight to it. Um, so no, I mean, it wouldn't bother me at all, as long as I was interested in what it was, basically.
That makes me think of one song you released, "Sing Me to Sleep." This was like 4 years
Hmm.
ago, and I watched the video
Hmm.
for that. And both the music production and the video production was very intricate and complex, and I mean,
Yeah,
evolved and
yeah,
changed constantly over the whatever 4 or 5 minutes length of the
yeah.
song. Now, to me, like when I'm making music, I tend to do more simpler things because like
Mhm.
doing that much stuff, as much as I love listening to it, I don't think I could do that much. I would start to be
Yeah,
like, I need to do something else. What
yeah.
was that experience like for you? Like, how long did that take you? And like, what was your mindset doing something that complex?
It's really funny that you brought that specific one up, because that, I think, was the apex of my, like, high effort period.
Okay.
Like, uh, I was it's a little difficult for me to, like, explain, but, like, I think about that a lot, that song and that video, because I don't feel like I've done anything that high effort since, and I'm kind of, like, wish that I kind of worry, sometimes that it's like, have I lost that? Have I
Mm,
lost whatever it was that led to that thing? And I'm still struggling with that question. I don't know.
okay.
There's a like again the YouTuber Ro Ramden's album, and I know I keep on referencing this thing that's not even out yet, but like when I heard that and heard how high effort it was and how like intricate it was from this person who's doing, essentially what I'm doing as well, content creation. So there's a peer thing going on. I'm like, wow, like people can do that and still be, in a position of doing YouTube videos and stuff like that. And it's been making me think quite a bit about what is effort in this sphere, like, and what constitutes like a project that you can feel like you really like did something important with. Sing Me to Sleep took, I don't know how long the album took. That album had a few tracks that were done as like OP1 tracks. So they were done basically like in a weekend. They were produced like in a weekend.
Mhm.
Those productions were always rather rapid. And then it had some other tracks that were like kind of cast offs that I finished for the album, sort of like just because I needed something else on there.
Mhm.
And then there were tracks like Sing Me to Sleep and like The World Is New, and some other ones that were made specifically for the album from scratch. And I think the track probably took me a couple weeks to really just like finish. I had a full-time job at that point. So like, I was working weekends and nights and stuff like that on stuff. The video probably took about 2 weeks to do. I was working in After Effects and I knew what I wanted, but I was really held up by just like compute power at that point, because a lot of that stuff, like working on like 4K video and then putting, that kind of like motion graphics and masking and all that kind of stuff,
Mhm.
like took a long time. But I mean, again, I really like doing that stuff. Like I love getting in to the video phase and starting to like color correct and do like motion graphics and stuff like that. I think video is really really fun.
Is the amount of effort behind the thing you made part of the way you like kind of determine its value? Like, Do you ever look at something you're working on and be like, I'm not doing enough in this?
Yes, I mean, yeah, a lot because like I I'm at a really weird point mentally and emotionally with content right now where I don't know what the point of it is. Like I've made so many different types of albums at this point, and I've also made so many different types of videos, and it hasn't really, this is going to get really depressing, sorry, but like it hasn't really like fixed my outlook on the world. Like I'm still here, I'm still me, I still have to pay bills, I still wake up in the morning with hangovers, like I still have all the problems that I did before I made any of this stuff. And what I find is that it's the process that I like. I like losing myself in the process. And once the thing's done, it means less to me. And that's always been the case. I don't think like, finishing an album is like, I don't tour. I don't like do anything like that, like a normal musician would. And I don't think I ever would. It's exhausting and doesn't make any sense. So once an album's out, it's done. Like it, the whole process is done. I have nothing to do with it anymore. It's just out there. So the amount of effort I put into something only matters to me as to how the process feels when I'm in it. Like does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like effort, the value of effort is a fluctuating value. Like sometimes a good patch and performance on the modular like can feel like it was a valuable effort. And then sometimes a week-long editing thing can feel like a lot of effort. But once the content's out there and once it's done, like I don't have anything anymore there. There's no sort of like residual feeling of accomplishment to an extent, because I have to just move on and do more stuff, which sucks. But I don't know if I don't know if it was like wasn't in this position, if it would feel any differently. Like, you know, like it's a weird thing. Sorry for the rant. I don't really know how to like answer the question without getting into like the concept of what like value is in
Right.
art at this point, or content.
But I mean, it sounds like that's, you know, everyone needs like purpose. And it sounds like about your
Mhm.
purpose comes from the actual process, not the finished
Yeah,
product.
I would say yes. I'm process driven. I like to do things, which is why I'm in this position, right? Like I liked to do all the things that I did. I just haven't really found a way to connect the doing to a I haven't created the perpetual motion machine of doing being the thing that like I'm constantly engaged in, so that I feel like I'm constantly uh, getting value out of existence. That
Yeah.
sounds really weird. Sorry.
No, that makes sense. When you first started just doing music for a living, like you stopped
Mhm.
doing your other job and you were just making a living as a musician, at that moment, did you have a kind of a lasting, like, oh, like I've really done something in life, right? Like I'm not just working in music on the side. I am
Yeah,
100% music. Was
yeah.
there a period there where you're like almost you could kind of like mentally rest for a bit in a sense?
I wouldn't say mentally rest, but I think you've actually keyed on something that I do take value from. I was just thinking about this on a walk the other day. It's like, okay, look, like, you know, you still have to chase the dragon of like, you know, feeling like you're accomplished. Like I don't think that will ever go away. And you've put yourself into this extremely precarious situation of a full-time creative in a very weird hybrid space, but like you did that, so that's cool. Like, you know, like you managed to pull that off. Now every time I think that, I'm like, dude, you need to shut up, because like this could go away. Like you could, you know, this could all go away. You'd have to go back to like working for somebody else in an office or something like that. And that terrifies me. Like, but in the meantime, I am happy that I get to do this. And I think that it is an accomplishment that I guess I should be mildly proud of.
Yeah, I mean, I think about I get lost in I've been doing music. I mean, now music software. Before I taught for a while. You know, I've been doing that for years, but there was a time before that where I was like selling cupcakes at a bake shop, you know, and doing
Mm,
jobs like that. And I just forgot what that state of mind was like when I was just like, I wish I could just do music for a living. And I talked to all these very beginner musicians who just they look at that and they're like, that's not possible. How could I ever get to the point where I do that? And yeah, like
well,
you just
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I'm not just doing music for a living.
Mm,
Like I have a billion things going on, like all these little stupid revenue streams from like affiliate links and
mhm.
selling presets, and there's like basically it's like this. I'm basically like a corporation, if you want to think of it that way, in terms of like all the ways that income comes in and all the things I have to engage in order to keep afloat. I'm not a full time professional musician. I'm a full time multimedia thing, machine of some kind. I think that would be the way to look at it. It just happens to be that music is the focus of the music, and music technology is the focus of what I do, which is fine. A hybrid existence is not bad. I'm not. I am a professional musician in that I've been paid to make music, which is cool. But when I look at what I do as a job, so to speak, it's more of a sort of hybrid multimedia thing with music and music technology at the forefront. I'd be hard pressed to just call myself a professional musician, because I'm not like gigging and just doing music full time. I'm doing like a bunch of other stuff as well. So it's it seems as if this is the norm for a lot of people that are in this position. They don't just do music. They use what they know about music to present things to people, or consult, or something like that. You basically take what you love, and you monetize it in the least horrendous way possible.
Right. I really like that actually. Uh, yeah, and nowadays you have to really.
Yeah.
I mean, some musicians can focus on just one aspect and make a living off that, but nowadays there's just so many different ways you can make a living, and gone are the days where you could just make original music and just make a living off selling the
Oh yeah.
recordings. Right? That
Yeah.
that disappeared in the late '90s with Napster. Right now we just have to do all this, but at the same time, I think it's made everything so interesting. I mean, YouTube's a
It's
great
incredibly
example. Look at
interesting.
all the amazing, cool things musicians are doing, even if it's
Mhm.
either playing music or doing music technology stuff like that. It's just created this really hugely diverse, interesting landscape of music.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the democratization of music creation is very clear, and that's not even like the only thing that's going on now. Like anyone can make an album and put it up, and that's great. Like I think people should express themselves and do that. But then we then we have the shit that like Spotify's doing, where they're like you know generating tracks, or somehow like or basically like creating libraries of music for people to experience on Spotify, so Spotify can make money and musicians don't make money off of that. So it's just like it's so weird. Like everything is so hyper driven at this point. I think that's kind of like how it feels. Like everything is like constantly pushing forward as fast as it possibly can. And it can be hard to actually like kind of exist in that, as a person and as a creative, which I'm sure you have experienced, being self-employed.
Yeah. Yeah. I think once you find something that works, you want to like really just double down on it.
Hmm.
But at the same time, then you worry, well, if I'm just putting all my eggs in one basket and this
Yeah,
thing just kind of
exactly.
dies
It's like,
out, then
oh,
I'm
that's
screwed, right? Yeah.
yep.
Um, yeah, you're right. It's fast. It's really hard to keep up with. And I kind of made it sound like it's sunshine and rainbows in the music industry, but you're right. I mean, corporations take advantage of that speed. They take advantage of everything
Yeah.
they can, and we musicians have to just sort of accept it or fight in some way. But I
We
guess,
got to I feel like we're all holding on for dear life. We're doing the best we can. And the degree to which you are able to the degree to which you're able to tune that experience for yourself, like, because it's never going to be ideal. Like, it's always going to have some caveat to it. You're always going to have to like, and I hate to use this word, but you're always going to have to hustle somehow. um, the degree to which you get to tailor that experience to what you can stomach or what you like, I think is one of the interesting things that we have access to now, with all these advances in communication and technology and stuff like that.
mm,
I do want to ask, like, the experience of making Centorial 2.0, because this is going to be a really big deal, I think, for people. Um, you know, how long has that taken you, and what's that experience been like?
I've been working off and on that. I mean, now I'm like really in it because we're trying to finish it, but I probably
Mhm.
started doing things for it maybe 2 years ago.
Okay.
And then there were times where I had to step away from it to work on something else, like make some improvements to building blocks or that kind of thing.
That's right. Yeah, yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I constantly get feedback from users, and I'm always worried, because it's 10 years old at this point, and it's very dated looking, and I'm always worried in the back of my head that someone else with like a
Who's gonna make
team,
something?
yeah,
Yeah.
and like they've got more funding and they've got a team and they can crank out a new one faster than I can like keep up. That's like
The the Behringer of Centaurial.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Right. Yeah, exactly. That's like the little voice in my head that's pushing me to constantly go with a little bit of anxiety.
That's reasonable. I mean, this stuff does move incredibly fast, and it wouldn't even have to be someone with a team. It could just be some like person that just decided they were going to do this and that they threw their entire like existence at it. Like
Hmm.
it, it's a reasonable concern when like you basically created the thing that would be iterated on, uh and you laid the groundwork, right? Like with Centaurial, like there's nothing else like that out there. So I can understand how you would have some sort of ownership over the concept, but also anxiety around making sure that it continued to be, what it started out as,
Yeah.
in a position in the industry or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I made building blocks, because I'd
Hmm.
always wanted to make that, right? I wanted to take the
That
same
thing's crazy.
approach. Yeah.
That thing's really, really cool.
Thank you. Yeah, that was a blast to make, and that's growing, and we're really happy with that. But that was
Yeah.
part of everything I'm doing relies on Centaurial. I need some other thing. And then
Hmm.
after I made that, it's so much more modern looking, and used my skills that I had refined over years to make that. Then I was looking back at
Hmm.
Centaurial like, oh, I gotta update this thing now, and I make it sound like a slog. It's also really fun, like writing
Yeah.
a randomization algorithm for synths. That's really fun, even though it was tedious. But like you said, you have to be driven to like this stuff. Like for the amount of work you put into your music and all the different streams you have to like really be into it. Like you said, you're process driven. You got
Yeah.
to wake up in the morning and want to do things like this if you hope to
Yep.
succeed.
Yes. That want is, I think, one of the most important things that we have, that motivation, and for it to be in our ownership as individuals, as opposed to it being exploited by, a corporation. Sounds like I'm 14 and this is deep kind of stuff, but like it's true. Like for you to be able to own that passion and sort of direct it like the way that you want it to be directed, I think is really, really powerful. And good things happen when that is able to be the case.
Yeah. Yeah. If you take the risk to do something on your own and then you can succeed, it is incredibly empowering and a very free way to live. It's
Absolutely. And
cliche.
once you get a taste of it, you're going to want more of it, which is good because I think everyone should get a chance to experience that and sort of start building their escape velocity towards being able to do more of what they want in the world, creatively and professionally.
Absolutely. Now, real quick for our listeners, Jeremy and I just discussed building blocks. This is another super effective course that we here at Audible Genius have created that's focused on what I call beat composition. If you're new to production and you want to start making your own music, building blocks takes you step by step through the process of writing the building blocks of beats, like drum patterns, bass lines, chord progressions, and melodies. And it all takes place in an actual online studio where you create music as you go. Check it out at audiblegenius.com. So what's next for you? Do you have an eye on what are you working on now, or what do you wish you could be doing? What?
Yeah, I don't know. Uh, I'm very bad at planning things. I I am in a very strange place mentally in regards to like what the channel is, what I'm doing, what the point of this is, how long will this succeed? And so I'm always thinking about ways to improve like the stuff I'm putting on the YouTube channel, and what it even means to have a YouTube channel in this case, because there's a couple different ways that this YouTube sphere works in the synthesizer world. You have the people that basically are doing reviews of every new thing that comes out. So that's a very sort of like magazine kind of idea. Like, here's the new thing. I'm going to tell you about it. That's a very sort of in the service of the industry kind of thing, very like consumer driven, and it works, right? Like it totally works, but it's not super interesting to me. I don't think I could just do that unless I was getting paid like a lot of money. But it is a part of what these channels do, what we do as music technology people online. So I'm trying to figure out a good balance of that still. I really don't know what that is. I'm not going to stop doing that in 2023, but I do want to like get a better handle on what it means to be involved in that space.
Mm.
I also want to come up with, I don't know, better ideas in terms of like stuff that goes on the channel that people will find interesting and that will also be engaging to me. So a lot of what I've been ruminating on is like just like what kind of content is going to end up on the channel. I don't know yet. Other than that, basically just trying to cultivate relationships with people in the industry. Specifically, contacts with the companies that make the gear, because there is a lot of opportunities there to consult and do presets and stuff like that. And I really like to do that kind of stuff quite a bit. Beta testing can be really interesting as well. And then that's pretty much it. Just like trying to find that weird balance between like, yes, this is my job, but how do I also make it like fulfilling? That's really what my goal is all the time. It's like, I know I got to make money, but how can I also make this a fulfilling thing where I don't like constantly have anxiety about whether or not I'm, doing it right or it means something in the greater scheme of things.
Do companies did they pay you to do like reviews of their gear sometimes on YouTube?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So if there's kind of two different ways that happens. One is, and this happens with modular makers a lot, Euro rack makers. They'll be like, we'd like to send you a module for review or whatever. And I'll be like, okay, cool. You're a small maker, like go ahead and send it over and I'll see what happens. I might do a video on it, I might not. If it's something that I really like and I think is interesting, then a video will happen. And then there are some people who are like, we want to, commission you for a video. And at that point we start talking, payment and stuff like that. And a paid review of a video of a thing, like an actual review, I think is problematic, but a paid demo is different.
Gotcha.
So, if like I do a video that walks through the features and show it off musically, then I don't feel like there's like a conflict of interest in terms of my opinion on the thing. But I try to be really, really really careful with saying yes to things if I feel like they're going to end up here and I'm not going to want to use them. In some cases, I'll get something here and I'll try it out and I'll be like, wow, this is not good. We're going to call the video off because here's the issues with this thing. One of the things that me and some of the other people in this sphere that are making music technology content on YouTube talk a lot about is what our value is to companies when it comes to this stuff. YouTube, I think companies see us basically as press a lot of the times. They're starting to come around to the idea that this is the new magazine spread sort of thing. People doing a video on your content is like if Keyboard Magazine did a article on it or something like that. And in that situation, a lot of the times they're basically getting paid to do an advertisement. People still are taking out advertisements in print media, and that costs a lot. It's not cheap. So we're trying to figure out what our value is in relation to that concept, because it does feel sometimes like, we are being taken advantage of in that respect. Like if it's hard to come up with the value proposition because, we've got all these things like conversion rates, like whether or not people actually click on the video and what the, click-through rate is to watch the video, but also like, does it generate sales and all this kind of stuff? It's complicated. So we don't want to get taken advantage of, but we also don't want I also don't want there to be like this constant conflict of interest where it's like they paid me and I'm only saying nice things about it or whatever, you know, like that.
Right.
That's something that you'll see a lot of blowback on online.
Yeah, because if you get the reputation of doing that, then no one's going to want to watch your.
Then no one's gonna think that like I'm. They'll just throw out that shill word that they like so much, and I really, really don't want to come across like that because that's not why I started this whole thing. That's not why I'm here. I just can't get away from the fact that like new gear comes out and I really like new gear and I want to like talk about it on the channel, you know? So it's a balance. It's a weird one. If it was pure corporate and pure like transactional, it would be easier. But unfortunately it's not like that. It's a weird, messy combination of things.
Yeah, because so you don't want to trash talk something in a video. You also don't want to get paid to say it's good,
Yep.
and you want to make money. So that it's like
Yeah.
a really tough balance between those three things.
Yeah, and it's my least favorite part of
Okay.
this whole thing.
Yeah.
It's I hate it. I hate it the most. Like I'm in a position, luckily, and knock on wood, where I have set myself up that you know between Patreon and lessons, that's my job, right? Like that's where the money comes from. I don't have to think of the channel as a thing that needs to be constantly making money for me.
Okay.
Like I said, it's a calling card. It's a calling card towards prospective students, and it's a calling card towards prospective collaborators in the music technology space. So I don't want to just turn it into like a you know an gadget or like a you know like
Right.
technology payola kind of thing.
Well, you know, the videos that got the most views, I was looking back through all of them, were ones you did a few years ago in the Teenage Engineering
Yeah,
OP1. And for those who are listening, you know, Teenage Engineering is this synth company, but they make really interesting, like music technology
they're a design
instruments.
company.
Design
They're a
company.
design company
Okay.
that happens to have made some
Yeah.
music instruments.
Because the OP1, if for anyone who hasn't seen it, it looks like a toy keyboard, but this thing is
Hmm.
deep. I mean, it could really do a
Yeah.
lot. And people, I mean, musicians love this thing. And some of your
Hmm.
videos, one of them got over 5 million views, and it's
Yep.
you making music with the OP1. Do you
Hmm.
know why that resonated so much with viewers?
Yeah, it's a couple things. The those view those videos. That I mean that's why I'm here, right? Is the OP1 videos. Those are what put me on the map. Um, One, the OP1 is a very engaging thing to watch. It's beautiful. It has very interesting graphics on the screen when you use it. So there's that. Two, I because of the OP1's way that it records, it's basically a digital 4-track tape recorder. So it doesn't work like a DAW. You can't like create a sequence and have it play and then um, go back to it. You basically have to make a series of linear decisions from the beginning of the tape to the end of the tape, which is your length of your song, to push through and make this piece of music. So I was forced to make an entire piece of music with all the ups and downs in the span of this video, which I think speaks to people quite a bit as well. I wouldn't have that if it was like something where I like had to like come up with a bunch of sequences and then like decide how they went together and like you know the whole nonlinear process of how a DAW works. Instead, it's like point A to point B, go, and it's kind of like a race.
Hmm.
The third thing is that like there was a lot of really funny, or excuse me, funny. There's a lot of like text on screen that is kind of like snarky and like sometimes humorous, sometimes offbeat.
Okay.
Sometimes it explains what I'm doing musically, and you know a lot of like you know memes and stuff like that. There was you know always something weird that happened in the video at some point,
Okay.
like some kind of weird motion graphic or something. So it was a very potent sort of musical infotainment in a very specific presentation. And it all just came together into this sort of unique package that seemed to really resonate with people. And that is very hard to reproduce in any other with anything else. Like it's just very, very difficult to reproduce that, even if I wanted to.
Okay. Got it. Well, you know, it really sounds like you have carved a space in the music world for yourself. I know you're still kind of figuring out what you want your channel to be, but you managed to put a lot of different things together.
Mm-hmm.
Would you have any advice for someone wanting to kind of do something, you know, advice for musicians who are trying to figure out their sort of space in the world as far as making a living? Like, was this
Yeah,
kind of random for you that you just sort of came up with these
yeah.
ideas, or was it more planned?
Random, but random in the sense that I tried to, when I felt like something was reaching a critical mass, I tried to make sure that I was there for it and I was there to make the most of it. So, for instance, when I saw that the first OP1 video was getting good views, I was like, I'm gonna do more of these, and that was the best decision I ever made in terms of content. Like that was the right choice. When a friend, a now friend, reached out and was like, I want to start a Discord for you, and I'll manage it. I was like, I don't know, but yeah, sure, let's give it a try. And now it's like my favorite space online. Like, and people that join it it's great. It's really, really great. When I started hearing from people in the Discord that, like, hey, have you ever considered doing lessons? And I started hearing that more and more. I was like, all right, well, let's give this a try. And like, it worked. And now it's my main job. So I think that this process, this concept of like paying attention to what's on the wind and taking advantage of it, is something that transcends how I approach it. I don't, I'll give you the opposite example of what I think this is. Like, when I was part of an MCN, I was part of Fullscreen for a little bit. For anyone that doesn't know, an MCN is a managed content network. It's an organization that you sign up with. They take some of your AdSense revenue and they offer you some tools and theoretically growth tools for YouTube. So when I was on Fullscreen, they would send out like these emails like, here's some tips on what to do with your channel. It's like, make content around holidays that are coming up, like look for trending topics that are happening and make a video about that. Like basically like constantly be riding this wave of trend as it appeared through like social and online spaces. That's the other side of this, right? Like if you just like constantly looked up what was trending online and followed that, you would kind of be doing what I'm talking about, but I think in a much more exhausting way, because you would never really have control over it. Like it wouldn't be you, it would be whatever was trending. And it's basically impossible to do that when it comes to like music tech content. That'd be very strange. But I think being open to understanding what your core skill set is, and then understanding what maybe there are like offshoots of that skill set. Like what else can you do with what you know that would be useful to other people in a way that, I guess could be monetized? Because ultimately, like we're trying to make a living, right? Like we do have that ugly fact that we do need money and we have to put food on the table. So the roads here will lead to you monetizing things that you are good at. And first of all, recognizing those things. And then second of all, finding a way to monetize them that isn't sort of odious to you is, I think, something that we should always be thinking about in order to make a living outside the normal ways of doing it, like the 9-to-5 kind of idea.
So it's almost like you know yourself, like who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Figure out the things that people want and where those two cross over. Things that are you and what they want.
Yeah.
And then do it with integrity. Essentially,
yes.
kind of
Yeah. That is the best sum up I've ever heard in my life. That's succinct. That's great.
That's really good advice. It's the same thing I did too. And I think that first part is like, figure out how it works for you, like who you are, your personality. Because once you hit that, man, you can really put passion into it. You can, like you said, like the OP1 videos, for example, they're potent. Like you were able to really put your personality into it. And you were really into the OP1, and like, when you find that sweet spot, it is really potent. That's a good word for it.
And I think, since I stopped doing those, like my issue is that like I'm kind of adrift. Like I those were the thing, those were the anchor, those were the things that were the most potent expression of my skills as a musician and my skills as a video editor and my personality. It was like all three just like right smack in the middle. So another thing that we might have to do is we might have to change. We might have to, make we might have to turn another cheek and figure out other ways to do things once certain things either become something that we just can't do anymore for whatever reason, or they no longer become viable as part of your profession, I guess.
Okay. Well, Jeremy, thank you so much for being on here and sharing this. And
My pleasure.
I wish you the best of luck in finding your next sweet spot.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it. Thank you for everything that you do. And yeah, it's been great.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
All right. Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Audible Genius podcast. Now, as you listen to these musicians' stories, you may find yourself wanting to make your own music. Or maybe you already can, but you feel the need to brush up on fundamentals, fill in some gaps. Well, I've got some super effective and engaging courses that help aspiring digital musicians find their voice and create music they love. And these courses are more than just a series of videos. They have interactive challenges in a music software environment where you actually create music as you go and get real experience. The first course I recommend is Building Blocks, where you'll learn beat composition and music theory in an online music studio. Check it out at audiblegenius.com. We also have Syntorial, an award-winning course on synthesis, where you'll learn how to create your own sounds with a synthesizer. Check that out at syntorial.com. And both of these courses are designed by yours truly and the team here at Audible Genius. So if you've ever had a desire to make your own music, I highly encourage you to check them out. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode.